Welcome to the New Paradigm for Mankind, a weekly discussion between Lyndon LaRouche and his scientific associates, in which we investigate the true nature of the creative human mind and the ideas necessary for the progress of mankind.
Hello and welcome to today's show. Today is October 2nd, 2013. My name is Megan Beets, and I'm joined today in the studio by Mr. Lyndon LaRouche and Michael Kirsch of the LaRouche PAC Scientific Research Team.
This is what the future is today, and I think because people have a difficulty in seeing how this report that we put out, Nuclear Nawapa 21, Gateway to the Fusion Economy, what that means. Well, this was reality. We had a president that was pushing this, right? And this is the reality of the world is just 50 years ago, this was the perspective. So when we say today, you know, this program, we have to do this, this is the most recent mooring point for actual human civilization and real sanity in the United States. And every single problem that we face today are all symptoms of this program being stopped. And what I want to run through quickly now is the actual program of Kennedy and play a few clips for you to show what I just went through. The first thing that Kennedy did was to appoint Glenn Seaborg and Leland Haworth to the Atomic Energy Commission in January 1961, right after the inauguration. And they were the visionaries. And in February, he then pushed the nuclear desalination program in Congress, saying that this was, we were going to see water shortages in 15 years, and that this would be one of the greatest developments for the world of converting brackish and saline water into fresh water. And then in May 25th, 1961, he makes his famous address to the Congress, not at Rice University, but the Congress, on the moon program. So I'm going to play you this clip here of speeches that he gave expressing that program.
This dam will produce enough electric energy, this one dam, to light the city of Edinburgh in Scotland. This dam alone will supply enough irrigation area larger than the nation of Luxembourg. This dam and the rest of the dams on this river, which 30 years ago would have provided only floods and darkness, now provide irrigation and light. And though those of us who are here today follow in the footsteps of those who made it possible, we share a satisfaction and also a commitment that we must in our time make it easy for future presidents of the United States and future citizens in the 1970s and 80s to visit projects like this, which have been planned and carried out in our day. And in 1944, under the administration of President Roosevelt, a comprehensive Missouri Basin Plan was authorized to accomplish all of these great objectives. This is the fifth of 6 great dams to control the main stream of the Missouri River. And I can assure those of you at the upper end of the Missouri and our good friends at the lower end that it will continue to be our policy to regulate the storage and the flow of water in these reservoirs in the most advantageous manner for all concerned that the best engineers in the world can devise. And 1992, as those men and women were 30 years ago who began to make this project possible, what are we going to do in 1962, beginning today, to determine what projects we should develop so that by the end of this century, when there are 300 million people in the United States, that there will be available to them land and water and light and power and resources and places to live and places to rest and places to work. So we salute this project today, and we salute those who made it possible. And we look to the future, and we look to the past, And we commit ourselves in 1962 not only to celebrate this project, but to move ahead in all the other areas, stretching from California to Cape Cod, Massachusetts, in building this country up. Every member of Congress, everyone in the executive branch, from the President on, in the field of national resources, has to plan during their period of administration or of office for the next generation, because no project that we plan today will be beneficial to us. Anything we begin today is for those who come after us. And just as those who began something years ago make it possible for us to be here, I hope we'll fulfill our responsibility to the next generation that's going to follow us. And the important lesson in all of those projects is that progress isn't being made as a result of a sudden idea suddenly coming into fruition. This project, the Frying Pan, Arkansas, and the project in South Dakota represented 10, 20, and 30 years' effort of devoted citizens. Things do not happen, they are made to happen. And this project is the result, and our action today, of 30 years of men, some of whom have now died, who thought that this dam would help this valley.
So these three things he did. He went to San Luis Dam Project, part of the California Water Project. That last one you saw. The second one was the Frying Pan, Arkansas, where we build the Trans Mountain Tunnel, Pacific Atlantic water diversion, and then in Pueblo, Colorado. And the first one was the Oahe Dam Project in Pierre, South Dakota. So that's August 16th and 17th, 1962. And you really see there his theme. He was living, as you've written about, Mr. LaRouche, on the simultaneity of eternity. He's living not in this present moment. He's living in really the question of human immortality. That's his theme. His theme is creation of something that's way beyond your own mortal existence. So that was what he was reviving. It was that full commitment.
I'm also glad he'd come here today because we begin work on the largest nuclear power reactor for peaceful purposes in the world. And I take the greatest satisfaction in the United States being second to none. And I think this is a good area where we should be first. And we are first. We are first. It's extraordinary how long it took. It's extraordinary what energy, human energy, was required to get this concept accepted. But as Scoop Jackson said, just as it took a decade to get the Grand Coulee, which of all the extraordinary national assets I've seen in the last 2 days is the most extraordinary, because it not only led to the prosperity of this valley, but led to what has been happening here for 20 years and now leads to this new breakthrough. From that action, which took a decade to accomplish, and which will pay for itself many times over, and in a sense already has, we have some idea of how important it is that these fights be won. But the other part of conservation is the newer part, and that is to use science and technology to achieve significant breakthroughs, as we are doing today, and in that way to conserve the resources, which 10 or 20 or 30 years ago may have been wholly unknown. So we use nuclear power for peaceful purposes and power. You know that in the next 10 years, I hope the people of the United States realize it, that we double the need for electric power every 10 years. We need the equivalent of a new Grand Coulee Dam every 60 days. In the next 20 years, we're going to have to put in the electric industry $125 billion of investment. And when we do that, this country will be richer, and our children will enjoy a higher standard of living. We don't realize that what we regarded as affluence 30 years ago is now way down below. Air conditioning, television, electricity, and all the rest have changed the life of this country, and we're going to find the same extraordinary changes in the next 20 or 30 years. Now, I think we must do several things. First, we must maintain an aggressive program to use our hydro resources to the fullest. Every drop of water which goes to the ocean without being used for power or used to grow or being made available on the widest possible base is a waste. And I hope that we will do everything we can to make sure that nothing runs to the ocean unused and wasted. third, as is well known here at Hanford, we must hasten the development of low-cost atomic power. I think we should lead the world in this. By 1967, 68, 1970, in the Northeast United States, where power rates are nearly double yours, we're going to find atomic power increasingly competitive. And by the end of this century, this is going to be a tremendous source. Our experts estimate that half of all electric energy generated in the United States will come from nuclear fission. These are the things we must do and many more. This great rich country of ours has a long unfinished agenda, but it's always had that agenda in creative times. And this is a creative time in our country and throughout the world. All of the trained and educated men and women who are making our country over, who are building a better standard of living for our people, this is a time when we wish to encourage that release of energy, human energy, which is the most extraordinary of all. And therefore, I'm proud to come here across the United States as President to express our thanks to you, to express my pride in what is being begun here today, which puts the United States, as I said, once more in the lead in a whole new area which can mean so much to people around the world. And I think it's very appropriate that we come here where so much has been done to build the military strength of the United States and to find a chance to strike a blow for peace and to find a chance to strike a blow for a better life for our fellow citizens. This is a great national asset here. I can assure you it will be maintained.
And that's why he was killed, to prevent the application of this. But this is the program which we have to do now today and revive that, and this is our program. Nuclear NWAPA 21, Gateway to the Fusion Economy, is really that program. Everything that we're seeing now is the effect of that being killed. And the only thing to do is revive it. And I think that people realize this, think to themselves about Kennedy as president. You see what this growth process, an evolutionary process of a nation means, and as he spelled out there, saying 30 years ago, what was affluent, today was, what we think is affluent was 30 years ago, and saying there's things haven't even discovered yet. So it was this complete evolutionary trend, and we had a president like that, and that's what I think should shock people. The fact that this was in place, and you say, how could that change so quickly? But I think that only by getting in people's gut that can this population of the United States today, and could ever this Congress, or whole new Congress, scrap these bastards, but could ever find the courage again to break through and fill this, make up for lost time. So, what I find shocking is that you look even at Kennedy's speeches when he ran for president. He was talking about all these future-oriented programs in 1960, and he said, my opponent saying nothing about the future. But how could he have this view of the future on all levels, and then the United States tolerate dropping that future thinking? Because what is it that gives someone like him the ability to plan out and then push, and then to realize that for people today who say, well, you can't do all these big things. Oh my God, NWAPA is so big. Or you got to just stick to one thing. You guys got to be practical. Just push this one nuclear power initiative. But you realize you had a president who did everything, because that's the only way you actually do it. And that is reality. What we're living in today is unreality. The way people talk about things today is actually not reality. This is the mooring point for reality.
You have to think of what the threat is that Kennedy actually represented. Who was he actually threatening? To whom was he a threat? And why? Because of an opponent. Who was the great opponent of the United States in that interval? Who was the great opponent of such measures by the United States, which the United States was capable of doing? Who is that enemy from abroad, with agents within our own country, who created this mess? What did Truman represent? Go back to Truman. Now, here we have President Roosevelt, and the invasion of Spain and France and so forth. This was already planned, but it was postponed and postponed. And the implication is that the postponement of this invasion of France as part of this liberation process was that they're waiting for Truman to die first.
Roosevelt, yeah.
No, Truman to come into power through the Roosevelt, right. And that was the issue. That has been the issue. So that every time we in the United States begin to move into one of these directions, which were considered a threat to the British Empire and its associates, that's where it comes from. There was only one real enemy of the United States during that period. It was not the Soviet Union. It was the British Empire, or the Anglo-Dutch Empire, more precisely defined. And we're still faced with that today. What's the Queen of England demanding? What has she been demanding? That we go immediately to a reduction of the population of the planet from 7 billion people to 1. And that the standard of living be lowered accordingly. In other words, the same thing, that is the British Empire, or the Anglo-Dutch Empire, more precisely defined. And that empire is still there. And we have our people who call themselves patriots. We have members of Congress who call themselves patriots. And they do want to have that name of patriot. But what do they do in practice? What they do is they say, let's be practical, which means I don't want to get shot as a member of Congress. I don't want to get thrown out of office. I don't want to be subjected to all kinds of indignities because I displeased a lady over there. Huh? This is the reality. And in such circumstances, you have to think very clearly about strategy. What is the strategy of the United States by which the United States, with that strategy, could have prevented much of this from happening? Things they didn't do. Well, you had Truman. Truman just passed everything over to
Churchill.
He
stayed in the White House for a month.
Yeah.
2 months. He just came over here and slept in the basement.
But this was the process. We had a stinking president who was really a clown, a thug, and a controlled personality. We had other problems after Kennedy. We had people, Johnson was scared to death. He said so. Then you had this nut coming in who caused a real problem, but we threw him out. But then when you look at the record, we never really got back to where we were with Kennedy. We were never allowed. Close. We were never even close to start at the beginning thing. What Kennedy represented, with Eleanor Roosevelt, who was his chief sponsor, he represented the continuation of Kennedy. He did more than that. As a representative of Kennedy, he was also representative of the founders of our nation. And that's the fact now. There have been a number of people who have been committed to making this kind of program work. I have been one of them. There have been others. But for one reason or another, either we didn't have, in one case, we didn't have the access to the leadership position, or lacked the courage or capability of designing and steering it. So therefore, all they have to do, like the British Empire, is look at the people of the United States, look at the institutions, look at who they can corrupt, make sure that it doesn't happen, make sure that what should happen doesn't happen. But who's the enemy? It's the Anglo-Dutch interest, which is the dominant power on this planet, politically. This is the enemy of the United States. It's what's called the British Empire, the Anglo-Dutch Empire. That's what the enemy is. And don't try to explain it by anything else. That is the enemy, and is the only enemy. It always has been the enemy Ever since the Dutch took over and called themselves British, because it was the Dutch Empire in the 17th century. And transmogrification, that becomes the British Empire, with the Dutch still in control. It's the same organization. What is it? It's global, actually. Look at the British Empire. What was included in the British Empire? What is still included in the British Empire, even though it's not counted as that? The mentality of people conditioned through generations to accept a British standard as the standard under which they, with their own costume and their own language, will use. And this is something which needs to be more clearly discussed and understood. Because it's all true, mankind is essentially noetic, creative. Mankind's progress is based on discovering things that were not in principle known before. That's called a revolution. That's called the discovery of physical principle, for example, or discovery of some other principle. Mankind's progress. Look, mankind is what? Mankind was born, as to us, our knowledge, as some guy down in Africa, cooking his food by fire. And from that point on, mankind has moved upward to successively higher energy flux densities as mode of existence. We find also that these, not just the mode of existence, but it's the effect of these mode. The effect that it increases the energy flux density, which mankind controls in his own mind. Discovery of principles that were not known before. And all of this has moved mankind forward to higher and higher energy flux densities. We've now reached the point that you're not in business unless you're dealing with thermonuclear fusion. That's one of the characteristics of the future. And if you're not in the future, what are you hanging around for?
You should tell that to some members of Congress.
They would have difficulty in understanding that.
Okay. Well, I mean, I think this is a very important discussion, and it just emphasizes and underscores how much work we have to do and how few of us there are to do it.
And have the courage to really do it and not fake it. Mm-hmm. Not collapse, not wince. And to enjoy the future. I would say the slogan should be, take a ride on the future for a change.
There you go.
Good. All right. Well, thank you very much, Michael and Mr. LaRouche, and thank you for joining us. We'll see you next week.
Point for actual human civilization and real sanity in the United States. And every single problem that we face today are all symptoms of this program being stopped. And what I want to run through quickly now is the actual program of Kennedy and play a few clips for you to show what I just went through. The first thing that Kennedy did was to appoint Glenn Seaborg and Leland Haworth to the Atomic Energy Commission in January 1961, right after the inauguration. And they were the visionaries. And in February, he then pushed the nuclear desalination program in Congress, saying that this was, we were going to see water shortages in 15 years, and that this would be one of the greatest developments for the world of converting brackish and saline water into fresh water. And then in May 25th, 1961, he makes his famous address to the Congress, not at Rice University, but the Congress, on the moon program.
Welcome to The New Paradigm for Mankind, a weekly discussion between Lyndon LaRouche and his scientific associates, in which we investigate the true nature of the creative human mind and the ideas necessary for the progress of mankind.
Hello, and welcome to today's show. Today is October 2nd, 2013. My name is Megan Beats.
So I'm going to play you this clip here of speeches that he gave expressing that program.
This dam will produce enough electric energy, this one dam, to light the city of Edinburgh in Scotland. This dam alone will supply enough irrigation area larger than the nation of Luxembourg. This dam and the rest of the dams on this river, which 30 years ago would have provided only floods and darkness, now provide irrigation and light. And though those of us who are here today follow in the footsteps of...
And I'm joined today in the studio by Mr. Lyndon LaRouche and Michael Kirsch of the LaRouche PAC Scientific Research Team.
This is what the future is today, and I think because people have a difficulty in seeing how this report that we put out, Nuclear Nawapa 21, Gateway to the Fusion Economy, what that means. Well, this was reality. We had a president that was pushing this, right? And this is the reality of the world is just 50 years ago, this was the perspective. So when we say today, you know, this program, we have to do this, this is the most recent mooring